I'm really honored to be with Dr. Gigi Abdel-Samed. Gigi has been an ER physician and founder, and she is the creator of Medical School for the Soul. Welcome, Gigi. It's truly an honor to have you with me here today.
Thank you, Kasha. It's awesome to be here. I love talking with you. It's always soul food for me. So, yeah.
Thank you. So before we talk about reducing risk in medicine, in hospitals, I just wanted to ask you to share a little bit about your story, because I know you have been an ER physician for 30 years now. And when we first spoke, what you shared with me really, really, touched me. And I know that we spoke for a long period of time that day. And I really wanted to share your story with others because I think it's so important for everyone to be aware of, what someone in your shoes has walked.
Thank you.
So I'd love to hear first what, made you decide to want to be an ER doctor.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's the serious side of that story, and then there's the funny side of that story. So, what made me want to become a doctor at all was visiting my grandparents in Egypt when I was 10 or 11 and just having the worst stomach ache. And over the course of a couple of weeks, losing about 10 pounds, which doesn't seem like much, but when you're a skinny 10-year-old, 10 pounds is a lot. And I remember my dad was like, "That's it, we're going to the doctor." And I was like, "We're flying back to Connecticut to see Dr. Fuchs?" And he was like, "No, we're going to see a doctor here." And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm not sure about this. I really like Dr. Fuchs. But I remember my dad carrying me almost maybe a mile or so. And it was that awkward age for little girls when their dads don't tend to hug them as much. And you're like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on." And so for him to carry me that whole distance really made me go, "Oh my gosh, am I dying? What's happening?" And when we got to the doctor's office, quote unquote, he proceeds to go up about 5 flights of steps in this old apartment building in Cairo. And he enters what looks to me like somebody's living room. And I thought, "Oh, we're not in Kansas anymore." It's like, what is this? Because I was expecting the nice chairs and the magazine racks and the plastic, dividers. And no, this was just a living room. And there were people there with literally chickens and bread and coffee to pay to see the doctor. And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, this must not be a very good doctor." Like, he can't even afford the magazine racks. And this is all unconscious as a 10-year-old would do. And I remember looking across as I'm sitting on my dad's lap, and there's a baby in its mother's arms. And I still can see her to this day. She was wearing the burqa and the black veil and the whole thing. And she has this baby, and the baby is blue. And I thought, "Oh my gosh." And I was like, "Daddy," as I took at his sleeve, I'm like, "I don't think I'm that sick. We're okay." And he's like, "No, we're staying." And I remember thinking, this can't be a very good doctor. But when we got in there and I lay down, and to this day, I don't remember if it was a table or a stretcher, but when he lay hands on my belly just to examine it, for the first time in 2 weeks, the pain went away. And I thought, whoa, like, what is this? And in that moment, it occurred to me like, wow, like, he's not here because he can't work somewhere else. He's here because he cares and he wants to take care of people and he's giving back. And I wanted to be that. I wanted to be the person that when I touched someone, the pain would stop and the pain would go away. Now, the pain eventually came back, and I still had to go through all the medications and the things, and it turned out to be a parasite infection called schistosomiasis from the snails in the Nile River after they built the dam. But that was it. Like, from that day, I was like, how do I become that? And people were like, well, be a doctor, because that's what he was. And so that wanting to give back took me across the years, across high school and, college and medical school and residency and crazy hours to become a doctor. Now, the ER part of the story, that's a little funnier because I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. And then, during your first or second year of medical school, you do or maybe it's a third year, you do rotations where you have to, and there's assigned ones where you have to do pediatrics and psychiatry and medicine and surgery. And I thought, okay, unfortunately, when I did my peds rotation, the only slot that was available was the peds oncology ward. And I was like, oh gosh. Now, I was a complete naive child who had never set foot in a hospital in my life until medical school. And so when I walked in and I saw children would cry every time they saw me because they're in a hospital and they have cancer and losing children, I was like, oh my God, if this is pediatrics, I can't do this. So then I started to look around, and I remember doing internal medicine or primary care. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so slow and so boring. And I'm like, I don't want to see people for 30 years for the same thing 30 years later. And they're still eating whatever they want and not taking their medicines. Nope. Or the fact that I order the tests and then they have to go get it and then have to wait a week. And 2 weeks later, we're just now getting the results and just now making it like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. So then I tried surgery. And I thought, I mean, I loved the pace of it, but there were several things I was like, okay, my gosh, like the male residents, I was like, why do they have PMS worse than I do? And it wasn't premenstrual syndrome. They were just so mean and crotchety because they were sleep deprived. Like in retrospect, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's such an inhumane residency in general. And back then, of course, this was in the 90s. It was even more like hardcore prove yourself boot camp. And the fact that as a medical student, I was on the lowest rung. So I would have to be there at 3 a.m. to round on the patients and do my presentation to the interns or residents who then came in later. And then they did their rounds to present to the attending. And they were like, well, but when you become a surgeon, you're done by 2 p.m. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because you started at 5 a.m. It's like, so after that, I was like, that's it. I don't ever want to see the sunrise again unless I happen to be up from the night before. It's too much. And then psychiatry. And I'll never forget. I was just like, oh, it's like, I think I might like this. And the attending was like, no, you're not allowed to become a psychiatrist. And I was like, what? Why? And he was like, you believe everybody. And I was like, is it not innocent until proven guilty? And I'll never forget. So this was in Philadelphia. So we're between New York City and Washington, D.C. And this young lady was in on an involuntary psychiatric commitment. And it was my job as the medical student to be the first to talk to her. And she's telling me how the vet would not give her back her dogs because she couldn't afford to pay. And I was like, oh, like I was getting irate. I was upset on her behalf. I'm like, you don't keep animals from. And then she tells me that she's on her way to the United Nations to be an interpreter because she speaks 6 languages. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm in complete and utter admiration. And then I go, and of course, my job is now to confirm with real people out in the real world what's the story. So I called the vet and he said, wait, you think I would withhold an animal from its owner because of money? And I was like, well, yes. He's like, no, she assaulted my staff or threatened my staff. I was like, oh, well, she didn't tell me that part. So then I call her brother and he was like, you think she speaks 6 languages? And I was like, well, yeah. And he said, she can barely speak English right. And I'm like, well, most of us who speak multiple languages don't speak English well. And so that was it. So at the end of my 3rd year of medical school, I looked around, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm not cut out for any of this. What do I do? And my best friend, Farzaneh Tabrizi, I'll never forget. She was like, well, why don't you do ER? And I was like, what is that? And she's like, that's what I'm going to do. Now, you have to remember that in mid-90s, emergency medicine as a specialty had only existed for about 20, 25 years. So it was a relatively new thing. Up until then, the ER was manned by internists, hospitalists, surgeons who were moonlighting on their days off from their regular practice. And I was like, is that a thing? And so I tried it. And I just remember it was like the slogan of the Peace Corps, the toughest job that you'll ever love. That was me. It was like, oh, I am in my element. I loved, in a 12-hour day, I just loved the fact that it was a trauma center. We had 3 level 1 trauma centers in a 10-block radius, which goes to show you how much violence there was, unfortunately. But even as a medical student, I was able to step in and help when you have trauma patient number 6 coming in within a 30-minute period. It's all hands on deck. And there's a new show now, The Pit, which I watched one episode of, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is literally my life. So that was it. So then, I fell in love with emergency medicine and never looked back.
That's incredible. And, for me, that job is, just incredibly difficult, and for me, overwhelming and chaotic. And so when I see that role, I'm amazed at, how physicians do that. I know in the last ER I was in, I arrived at 11 p.m. There was one doctor in our whole hospital in the ER during the night. And I left at 6 a.m. and I didn't get to see a doctor. So the importance of having, doctors who want to do this role and, are able to be sustainable in this role is really, really, clear to me, because of how unpleasant that was, to wait all night and not be able to see anyone. So I just want to commend you for doing this, because, it's I think such a relief to have people like you in this kind of position. And now, the work that you're doing, supporting other doctors to be able to stay in this role without burning out, is so important. So, I asked you to share a little bit of your journey through this. So over these 30 years, what have been, the highlights and the lowlights, and how did this idea of reducing risk in the ER and for doctors come about?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say that, I felt a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye at the way you described your experience, and it hurts my heart, and I'm sorry. One of the greatest things for me in the ER is the honor that it is to be there for people when they're hurting, and literally to create calm out of the chaos. And when I have someone who comes in and they go from being scared to having one of the best experiences of their life, I'm like, okay, I'm doing God's work. I'm here doing what I'm supposed to do. But so I just wanted to say that first. So the journey, the journey, of course, has been all over the place. There's so many things that they don't teach you in medical school, and they don't teach you in residency. I actually am submitting applications for a TEDx talk, and the working title right now is How Medicine Became My Narcissistic Lover and How I Healed the Relationship. And I think that probably encapsulates the journey, because, as we start out bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wanting to save the world, wanting to make a difference, we do so much to get into this career, profession, vocation. And then you go into medical school, and it's like life outside of school doesn't exist. And then when you go into residency, back when I did it, there were certain rotations. I was doing 120 hours a week. So there was no life outside of medicine and healthcare. And then when you're done, you suddenly become an attending, and no one gives you a roadmap to how do I reconcile that I've been wanting to change the world, heal the world, save the world, to now that I'm done, I'm getting paid so much more than the slave labor wages I did for 7 to 10 years, and I still haven't saved anyone. And I think there's this arrival fallacy of, when I'm done, when I do all this, when I sacrifice all of this, when I get to the other side, suddenly things are going to be different. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, no, wait, this is the same exact thing I've been dealing with. But you've been so busy surviving and keeping your head down that you never had a chance to notice some of the brokenness in the system and the toxicity that's all around you. And the other part, I think, which was even deeper for me, and I only saw in retrospect, was the loss of meaning and fulfillment. And for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go do the track. So I became an associate director in the ER, then a level 1 trauma center. Then I became a medical director. Okay, next stop, I'm going to become chief medical officer and work my way up to become CEO and get an MBA. But somewhere along the line, I'll say I'm burned out, but burnout really, I've come to label it more as disengagement. It's when you start to disconnect and go, I'm not sure this is worth it. And the terrifying or the scary thing about disengagement in us as physicians is you won't see it, because we are consummate professionals and we've been taught through years of residency to perform at the highest levels, regardless of how engaged we are in it. And so, hospitals are like, oh, well, he's a great doctor. Well, wait, he's a great doctor as he's walking out the door. What happened? And so they don't realize that there's so much that they can do way ahead of the burnout. And so for me, my journey was actually through addiction. And so somewhere along the way, as I'm doing night shifts, Ambien, which is a sleeping pill, came out, I want to say 2004, 2005, maybe. And I started taking it for night shifts. And then over time, it stopped really putting me to sleep, but it made me dissociate to where I just didn't care. I was like, okay, suddenly the things that bothered me didn't bother me as much. And it got to the point where I was prescribing, and by the grace of God, this was before it was a controlled substance. Now, unfortunately, if it was a controlled substance, I never would have used it in the first place. So it's a little catch-22. But I was one of the first people that had the sleepwalk, sleep drive, that rare side effect that they warn about in every ad now. And it got to the point where I ended up surrendering my license to deal with the addiction. Now, this was back in, I want to say 2006, 2007, end of 2006. And back then, nobody knew you could even be addicted to Ambien. And so trying to get help for something and being told just Ambien, like you can't be addicted to that, was super frustrating. And I was like, I know what this is. I'm like, I'm not able to control what I do or how I do it. And my whole day focuses around that. So going through that, I finally voluntarily surrendered my license to deal with it, thinking, okay, I'll take a few months, do whatever, come back. And by the grace of God, so November 23rd, 2007 was my sobriety date. And it was tough because I actually went through a seizure coming off the Ambien. It acts very much like alcohol. And when you stop the Ambien, I went 3 days without sleep, hallucinating, had a seizure on the 3rd day, 3 more days without sleep. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm done. I'm like, I would rather die having a seizure than have to be at the mercy of this thing. But that sent me down the road of like, what happened? This was not on my career plan. And this was 10 years in. And so that led me into really doing the deeper work of who am I, like without the white coat. And what happened was I had to wait 2 years to get my license back. And I was like, wait, what? Why? It was voluntary. And they're like, nope, even if it's voluntary, if you thought it was serious enough. So during that 2 years, I started working at Starbucks as a barista. And
Wow.
it was crazy to go from the $1 million house in Midtown Atlanta and the lake house near Lake Oconee, near the Ritz, to sharing a room in a rehab facility with 4 other women with 1 bathroom. 5 women, 1 bathroom. Not a good look. And no TV, no telephone, no laptop, except for like the community room. And what it taught me, it was like God said, okay, let's strip it all away so you can figure out who you really are and why you're here on this earth and why you do what you do. And so that time at Starbucks, like really, it was amazing because it got me out of the house in a time that was really hard, because I wasn't able to work. I went through foreclosure and bankruptcy. So all of the things that my ego held onto as proof that I was worthy were stripped away. And it was like, well, who am I without the white coat? And I just remember making coffee at Starbucks and putting a smile on people's faces and remembering their stories and their children and their what's important to them. And I still have friends from those days to this day. And it showed me that everything I needed and what was valuable about me was actually in my head, my heart, and my hands, and not in my white coat. And I think that's one of the biggest things along the burnout journey is at some point it goes from being this beautiful prize that we worked so hard for into the golden handcuffs of I can't let it go because now I have a lifestyle or I have the money or I have the sense of like, okay, I go to a party and people know who I am right away because I say doctor. So that was a big turning point for me. And what I learned over time, so that's when I branched out and I had studied with a shaman in Arizona, Native American. Again, this was in the early 2000s before. It seems like everybody is a shaman nowadays. But and it branched me into Reiki and spirituality and looking for that sense of meaning of like why did I sabotage myself so spectacularly? And why do I keep doing what I do? Or do I keep doing? And part of it was I wasn't sure if they were going to let me ever go back to being a doctor. So I went back to get my master's in business just in case. And at Starbucks, they were like, wow, we really like your work ethic. You're great with the clients, the customers. And they wanted me to go up the ladder and, become an associate manager and so on. And that's when I realized I'm like, I'm not just a survivor. I am a thriver. No matter what is given to me, I will turn it into something amazing. And I also started to dig into the beliefs and how I ended up where I was and realized that part of the issue was, my grandfather was a janitor in Egypt, custodian, I guess you're supposed to say. And he raised a family of 7 children on that meager salary. But when he passed away, there were over 300 people at his funeral because he just made sure to touch everyone's life. And it was like, wow, how could I have made more in 1 year than my grandfather had made in almost a lifetime? And so there were a lot of unconscious beliefs there too for me. And I realized over time that perfectionism was a big part of it too, that there was this, it's like we take this sense of like, I have to measure up, which again is ingrained in us. Like you've got to take the MCATs, you have to compete, 1 in whatever percent is going to get in. Hope it's you. First year in medical school, look to your right, look to your left. 1 out of 3 of you is going to be gone by next year. It's like all of this is beaten into you. So then I think as physicians, it becomes so ingrained that we have to like, okay, how good are you today? Oh, that's fine. You did that yesterday. How good are you today? What did you do today? And then when you add on top of that, that if you make the wrong choice, sometimes it is literally life and death. It takes that perfectionism to a level of feeling like a straitjacket. But we take such pride in the perfectionism. And what I've come to realize over time is that perfectionism is also a form of addiction. And let me reframe. So what I've come to see is I had an addictive personality, even though I'd never, smoked marijuana or anything else. I was like, but my addiction was perfectionism and being a workaholic. But those are sanctioned addictions in our society. Oh, we say it with pride. Oh, you're such a workaholic. Or, I remember as a director, somebody putting something on my desk and they're like, oh, you know what they say? You want something done, give it to a busy person.
There's a cost to that we don't see much of the time because the costs are so hidden from society. And because it is sanctioned and a part of the culture, it is very prevalent and common across a lot of the industries that I work in as well.
Yeah. Well, it's actually what makes us so good at what we do. I joke now that the number of degrees I hold is inversely proportional to my low self-esteem and or how much I felt I needed to prove. And the irony is in our society, the higher you get on the food chain, the more you feel like you have to prove. And so, from the outside, people look at you and think, oh, you're living this A+ life. Like, oh my gosh, I wish I had the house or the car or the things. But on the inside, you're like, oh my God, I'm living a C+ life at best. or, you have it made. And yet, if you ask anyone, whether it's a CEO or, a physician, you're like, no, if anything, you feel like you have to work hard. The things you worked so hard to create now own you. And that's a really hard place to be. And that's where that feeling of golden handcuffs comes in. And what you said is exactly right. Like there's a cost to the perfectionism. And the cost is that you never feel worthy to receive. You never feel worthy to rest. You never feel safe enough to stop. And instead of being able to have friends and community, you feel like it's lonely at the top. And if someone says they like you or even love you or whatever, you're like internally, and it's unconscious sometimes, you're like, yeah, right. How could you? You don't know the real me. You don't know that I'd rather secretly be wanting, sitting on an island doing nothing. If you met the real me, you wouldn't like me. Or I
Wow.
wouldn't enough. Yeah.
And this pattern you've shared, I don't know, is it the same, do you think, for both men and women? Because I see this with women so often, that pattern of, constantly trying to prove. And actually, I made a very, very conscious choice when this snuck up on me this week. And I thought to myself very consciously, I don't have anything that I need to prove anymore. And I can just be and share, and those people can make their decisions based on the real information. There's nothing that I need to change. And so that was, really a moment of honoring myself at this stage of life. And it is because I have seen so many of my clients go through life feeling like they constantly have to prove themselves. One of them I've been working with for many chapters of her life. And through these chapters, I've seen that come up on a regular basis. And finally, now she's in a stage of life where that peace of mind is starting to, come for her. And there's that sense that she's allowed to rest and has the permission to rest, which is an incredible pattern I find, because it is not one that is shared openly enough.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm like, I really acknowledge that, because it's crazy that that's an act of courage to honor ourselves. It shows you how much is ingrained in us, all of the shoulds and the unspoken expectations that we walk around with, that it becomes an act of courage to be like, oh, I'm going to honor me first. So like, kudos for sure. As to, do men feel it? Absolutely. And, over the years, I've definitely worked with some men as well, but it shows up differently for them. And I think society adds another layer where for men, their ability to provide financially becomes, or can become, part of their identity and their label, and becomes part of their inability to feel worthy or to feel like a good man or to feel like, they're doing enough, and they feel judged. Now, men and women are very different in the way we carry things. In fact, it's quite interesting, but the more a man feels that way, the less he will share it, because men are trained more as warriors, and a warrior would never share his weakness. That's just silly. Let me go tell the enemy how to break me down. And so to have worked with some of these men is one of the biggest honors, because it means that they understand that they're safe enough to open up, and that I've got their back. If you see any of the wartime movies, it's always about a band of brothers and, who's got your six. So yes, men absolutely have this and do this, but they sometimes suffer even more silently, if that's possible, than the women do. We just don't hear of it as often. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love for, you to share now about this journey that you've been on with creating medical school for the soul. What was really the core driver for you there? And what is it?
Yeah. Oh gosh. like just the name makes me so happy. It's just like, because for me, that's the part that medicine forgot to include, is the heart and soul. And so medical school for the soul is to put the heart back in healthcare. And for me, I'm choosing a new way of healthcare for the world that integrates what I call Christ consciousness. And that's not the religious sense, but it's the sense of, I've always had this crush on this man named Christ, because just the way he lived and the stories about him, and the fact that he could walk among the lepers and heal them because he didn't look at them as less than, and even some of his disciples were, less, undesirables, if you will, it's just, but to have in my heart, I feel like my mission as a doctor is to be God's hands on this earth and to be a channel for him. And what that means is holding that template of wholeness. And my job is to be a protector and to be that trusted family friend, and to see the patient in the truth of who they are in their empowerment, even as they're going through their lowest moment when they feel the most disempowered. But I know that that's not the truth of who they are. And, I like to give the analogy of surgery. You can be the greatest surgeon and you did the surgery perfectly, but you're not doing the healing. You're not sitting there inside the wound day in, day out, 24/7, go heal, heal, heal. The body does that. The body has this amazing wisdom. The body is an amazing healing machine. And over time, with all of these, the way the system has been set up, we've lost focus of why we became doctors in the first place. And they've shifted our lens over to the time, and you're spending too much time with the patients or the charting or the, all the things. And that's what happened with me at some point, about seven years or so in, as it led up to the addiction, I was starting to look at patients and feel resentful, like, oh gosh, it's too busy. There's too many patients. Oh, they're a drug seeker, like all the things that, as physicians, we go through sometimes. And after I went through the addiction and the rock bottom and coming back, I thought, whoa, how did I get from the little girl who just wanted to make a difference to, wait, now you're irritating me? What? And so, this is that analogy of a relationship of, like, sometimes you meet a new partner and you fall in love with them for something. 10, 20 years later, the thing you fell in love with is now annoying the crap out of you. Wait, what? What just happened? And so, yeah, you're like, wait, I fell in love with this? What was I thinking?
Yeah, so it is interesting how the thing that attracts you can often be the irritant later. Yes, it's a pattern I've seen.
It is, and it's very human. But and with any good marriage or relationship, there comes a time when you choose what to focus on. Am I going to choose on the thing that annoys me and irritates me and is driving me nuts? Or am I going to focus on all the good things that come from this relationship? And so that's where I started, I went through coaching, became a coach, I started working with others, and I realized what's really happening is there's several layers where we need to release all of the expectations and the shoulds. And so at one point I called myself an uncoach, because I help people remove things rather than add more on top. And then from there, we have to restore connection to our own values. And when I reconnected to why I became a doctor in the first place, when I reconnected to my core values, which was like, okay, like, what is it about medical school, or what was it about doctoring that I actually loved? Okay, well, I loved the connection. I loved feeling of service. I loved, there's a part of me that I lost along the way, which is I loved having fun. And I was like, wait, like, what happened to that? And so once I started giving myself permission to do and be the things I knew I was, and I stopped looking to the system to give me permission. Because the way it's been set up is, in most of our minds, there's this learned powerlessness of, I have to meet the metrics first, and then I'll be able to do what I want my way. Then I can take a little
Mhm.
extra time. If I've seen enough patients and I've met the metrics and I've done all the checklist, then I might have an extra minute or two to spend with this patient. And it's putting the cart before the horse. And so what I did, I was like, I'm going to do it my way. And what I learned is when I'm truly present and I'm not thinking about the metrics and I just take care of the person in front of me the way I want, it was crazy how deeply I could go with the patient in 5 minutes because I'm so tuned in and I'm not mentally out the door to the next patient or worrying about something else. And again, mind you, this is an ER, so I'm always conscious of the other 30, 40, whatever patients in the department, but you can still be present in that moment. And patients would open up and tell me things. I'll never, I'll never forget this one patient said to me, I haven't told my primary doctor this, and I've been with her 7 years. She said, I was afraid she would weaponize it against me and use it every time something came up, but I trust you. And that blew me away. And I thought, if other doctors could feel what this feels like, they would remember why they're doctoring again. And by putting that first and having fun, like just silly things, like I walk into the patient's room and I'm sure the nurses get tired of hearing it, but the patient's hearing it for the first time, and I'll say, welcome to the body shop. Here. And, imagine coming to the emergency room and you're scared and it's 2 a.m. And instead of coming in and being all serious and, professional and, grumpy like I used to be before, the doctor says, welcome to the body shop. I'll be your mechanic today. And there's always kind of either like, oh, what? Or there's always a little chuckle. And I'll just say, are we doing the 20,000 mile tune up or the 60,000 mile? Are we just topping off fluids? What's happening? And it just breaks the ice and it shows them we're human. And that put the fun back into it for me. And so I coined this phrase, and I don't know if I stole it from someone, but I use it. It's called selfish altruism. Because in medical school and residency, they teach you all about altruism, but they forgot the selfish part, which is if it doesn't feed me, if it doesn't give me something, then it just drains me, depletes me, and eventually I'm going to resent it and want out. And so this whole medical school for the soul is teaching what I learned, and I've taken physicians through it individually in the past, but now it's like, wait, there's a whole world out there that's hurting. And the irony of it is the patients are hurting because they feel disconnected from us, and they come in armed with ChatGPT and WebMD because they don't know who to trust. And the doctors are hurting because they feel like this isn't what I became a doctor for, to just keep feeling like I'm on a treadmill that I can't get off. And so medical school for the soul is currently, I've pivoted to work with hospitals. And so it's being licensed to healthcare systems and hospitals because the people who are running it, the CFOs, the CEOs, they're not clinical people. They're not medical. And they don't understand that all of these variables and metrics that they're chasing, I mean, if better turnaround time, if being seen faster, if the throughput, if all of these metrics were really the answer, they would already have what they want. Their patient satisfaction scores would be higher. They wouldn't be losing doctors. And this is the reality nowadays, is that doctors are leaving medicine. And that breaks my heart too, because imagine trying so hard for 7 to 10 years, and then you get there and you go, it's not worth it. And I call it the 7-year itch because I noticed over time, I've been doing this now for 30 years. And by the grace of God, it's been, I guess, 2007 to now 18 years since recovery. As I've noticed that about 7 years in, I call it the 7-year itch. They're finally getting out of residency. They're finally getting their feet under them. And they look around and they go, wait, what? How did I get here? This isn't what I signed up for. And if we can catch doctors in that moment where we can help them reconnect and rediscover the meaning and the why, and understand that, no, this is the same relationship you signed up for. You're just growing up. When you were in your 20s, it was okay to have, last minute dates and go to McDonald's and a booty call at 2 a.m. Now in your 30s and 40s, you're like, whoa, dude, I need some respect. And so that's why I work that is like my narcissistic lover, and how to, again, you might need a divorce. You might need to break up with the partner, but there might be a way where you've been assuming your partner is expecting certain things of you that aren't actually there. And so this is the work, is to connect for the CEOs and the hospitals, that the one variable that doesn't show up on their dashboard that actually drives patient satisfaction is physician engagement and their sense of meaning and purpose. Because when patients come in and like, oh, I'm going to get seen in 20 minutes, that's amazing. And if I get seen and feel dismissed and feel like a number and didn't feel heard, and remembering that 70% of communication is nonverbal,
Mm-hmm.
you're still going to get low patient satisfaction scores. And the cost of replacing a physician can run anywhere from $80,000 to $300,000. And nowadays, hospitals are having to hire more and more 1099, meaning independent contractor. And so they've lost their standing in the community in a lot of ways. They're losing some of their greatest assets, which is their people, which is their doctors that patients know are worth waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so
I'm sure they're not taking away instantly. I'm sure that that's been something on their mind for some time before they make a decision like that. And so would you see that as the biggest risk of all, is the loss of doctors? Is there anything else as well that we need to
from
be
the hospital
about?
side? You mean from the hospital side and the executive side of medicine? The risks.
Society too, and society in general.
Yeah. So there's, the cost goes in so many, like there's so many streams, like the multiple streams of income. This is multiple streams of hurt and operational risk and financial costs. So, you're losing physicians who have experience, which then costs you on the patient satisfaction. It costs you on the retention. Hospitals are bringing in wellness programs and wondering why, now that they have yoga and other things available to them, doctors aren't happier. But the cost across time is going to be, they're losing their operational excellence. They're losing their satisfaction in the community. And for the hospitals, there's something called HCA, HPS in the States. There's different measurements of how good you are as a hospital. And a lot of them do rely on patient satisfaction scores. And a lot of the hospitals here have done things like, oh, you'll be seen in 20 minutes, and they'll put it on the billboard. But what's actually happening is the patient comes in, they're seen and triaged in 20 minutes, but then they're going back into the waiting room for 3, 4, 7, 8 hours. So you're making it look good that you've been seen in 20 minutes, but you and I as people and as patients go, no, I haven't. And by the time they finally come back to a room and they're seen, they might get 5, 10, 20 minutes, or they might be there for a couple of hours, but they're not getting that sense of a partner and someone who understood what the real issue is. And so medical school for the soul is for the physicians, but it helps them reconnect to the patients, reconnect to themselves, reconnect to the meaning in medicine, reconnect to why they do it in the first place, and to start having fun again and to do it on their terms.
Yeah,
So
it's such an energizer, and it's so neglected, right? Because everybody is so serious in medicine in the corporate world as well. There are so many parallels that I see when you describe those. And I remember when we first spoke, when you talked about presence and how that changed your interactions with patients and how much faster you could just see what was happening. You would hear faster what the real issues were. And that really struck a chord in me because it is something that I work in with my clients, and it's something that's so lacking in the world. I feel like everyone is suffering from a lack of presence in some way, and certainly the devices, the mobile phones can get in the way of presence. And I just started to pay more and more attention to how this was impacting, myself, people, what the cost is of not being present. And when you brought this up in medicine and said that actually, you were able to learn faster what the real challenges were, that was something that was unforgettable for me. And I could see the difference that it makes because, I remember here when my father was in the hospital, it wasn't the doctor, but it was one of the clinical coordinators that I found to be highly unempathetic. And I felt, such a disconnect, so much frustration in those moments as a caregiver, and really unempowered, right, to be able to do anything. And so it made me realize how important that is for everyone in medical care to be able to have that exposure. And I think you mentioned to me that you really came across that after you did your executive coaching training as well, because this is when I first came across really being present for people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's why you and I just gel so much, because we have a lot of the same values and we see what's most important in life. And I appreciate that about you. Presence is one of these things that can sound nebulous. And yet, this is what I'm teaching. And what the hospitals are slowly seeing is that it shows up on your bottom line. And when you're present, so a couple of things. Going through the coaching program where, my certification, what I learned is you cannot be present for someone else if you're disconnected from yourself. And as a coach, and I'm so grateful to my mentor because he comes from such a place of integrity where as a coach, you cannot take anyone deeper than you're willing to go yourself. And I will say that's one of the downsides of having integrity as a core value is, oh my gosh, I always have to go first and go through it myself first because I have to walk the talk. Like, oh, oops, maybe I should have picked a different. But I think that's the biggest part is over time, physicians have become disconnected from themselves. They've learned to live in their minds. And so even when they're listening, they're not actively listening. They're listening, thinking, get to the point. They're waiting to interrupt. I think they did, a study where doctors would interrupt patients within 30 seconds of speaking. And so I've trained myself to wait and let the patient finish completely. And then when they're done, I'll say anything else. And that is such a simple thing, but it strikes terror, I think, for most doctors because they think, oh my gosh, this patient's going to go on forever. And then I'll be behind and I won't be. And the reality is the opposite. That when they're given the space and when you're just present, you're like, I'm here. What do you have to say? It makes such a big difference. And I love what you said because it's a skill. And, in the age of AI, when a computer can replace all the technical things, and I'm sure soon they'll make robot doctors, what they can't replace is the presence and the empathy. They can mimic it, but they can't, notice the hesitation before a word, or they won't necessarily notice the tears in your eyes unless you're sobbing. They won't notice the little things that as a leader, as a CEO, as a consultant, as a doctor, when you're tuned in and you're watching, you don't miss the little things. And the little things are where people are hiding the things that matter most. And what I've learned is to speak in the language of the person I'm talking to. So for patients, I'll ask them, what's the biggest thing you're worried about? And they kind of look at me and I'm like, well, I'm sure you must have Googled it, or you must have. And they're like, and they kind of look sheepish, because suddenly there's a doctor who's not making them wrong for doing it. There's a doctor who's like, no, I want to know. And I will say to them, I can do the tests. I can make me feel good about your results. But if I don't answer your worries, you're going to leave here just as scared or worried as you came in. And it makes all the difference in the world. And presence is the variable. Meaning and presence and purpose, that's the variable that really makes everything run. Because when we feel connected and present, we feel that we're doing something that means something, and we remember why we're doing it.
I'm curious, if you have seen a similar pattern where the busyness just leads to surface level, information that you might be missing from patients if you don't ask some of the questions, or if you're not fully present. Is that something that you have seen?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, part of it is inevitable. Being in the emergency department or having things happen, you can't really control the pace of things. If 3 critical patients show up at once, you've got to deal with all 3 at once. And at the same time, I think that's why I know that this work is translatable, or it applies to other areas, because when I got to the point where I know who I am so deeply that nothing around me can change who I am or how I show up, to me, that's truly how I can show up in the middle of the chaos, and I become the calm in the chaos. And because I'm slowing down internally, on the surface, you won't see any difference. I'm still do this, do that, do the other. But internally, I'm focused on, interesting, I'm seeing this, but I'm not seeing that. When we slow things down, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. It's like there was a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and I think it was called The Tipping Point. And it was a book that talked about, if I remember correctly, for example, the fire chief. They went into a house that's burning, and he was like, okay, get out. And 30 seconds later, the floor collapsed. And there's something that we can do. And doctors, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit that we've done their 10,000 hours. We've become kind of unconsciously competent. Just we're so good at it that we don't. But now things have become so unconscious that we're making decisions thinking that, oh, where did that come from? But for example, with the fire thing, when they slowed it down, they said, well, what was it? And he said, oh, well, I heard the crackling in this, and I didn't see, this in the floor, and I didn't see. So there were like 10 things that when he slowed it down, he realized that he made that quote unquote split second decision from actually 10 things that he was aware of because of his experience. And I think with doctors, once they get busy or into this kind of Tasmanian devil whirlwind spin, they're like, I have to do. Now they're disconnected. And instead of being present, they're like mentally in the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Where when they slow down and are present, even in the middle of the craziest, in fact, I become calmer in the most intense situations, because that's when I need to stay calm the most. That's when I need to be more tuned in. But yes, you can definitely miss things. Excuse me. I'm going to get some water.
Yeah, I've noticed also, the co-regulation piece. So when we are calmer, that also often helps other people around us become calmer with their mirror neurons automatically. So for me, even though it's not a conscious part of my work, I notice it on a regular basis because people will often come feeling chaotic and then leave much more calm and clear and focused. So it's really interesting to see how that works, the biology side of
To your point,
connection.
they feed off each other. Like the doctor is busy, things are busy, the patient feels rushed, and it escalates where when you're grounded and present, you can become the rhythm that everyone else tunes to.
Yeah. And so I'd love to hear, what are your next steps with the Medical School for the Soul? You mentioned that you're planning to do a TED Talk. What else is in the works?
Yeah. I do have a book in the works, but that's a labor of love. So the book is in the works. And the TEDx talk right now is just the one that's most fun and exciting for me, because I'm like, oh, I finally found the analogy. And I was like, it just feels sassy and fun. I was like, how medicine became my narcissistic lover. I was like, it just sounds fun, and how I healed the relationship, because that's so applicable to so many. And right now we're rolling out the 90-day pilots for hospitals and healthcare systems to show them, hey, is physician engagement that variable that you've been missing? That's actually the linchpin to everything else that you're trying to do. And, getting feedback and from physicians and so on. So this is where I'm at right now. And this is my work for 2026, is to get it into as many hospitals and healthcare systems as possible, so that they can see, as someone who has a master's in business and someone who's been on the administrative side and the clinical side, I feel like I get to be the interpreter to bring the two worlds together, because we actually all want the same thing. And somewhere along the way, it's become us versus them, and it's adversarial. And by making it us versus them, it's now become kind of against the patients, and the doctors and the patients are the ones who suffer. And somebody said to me once, how do you stand it working in this system? And what I said is, I love medicine. I love healthcare, and I love my patients. And if I leave, who's left to save it? And my take on it is, we are the system. The system isn't this nebulous thing out there. The system is me going to work every day. If there's not an ER doctor in the ER, it closes. There's no system there. I was like, I am the system. And, I loved Gandhi's way of being, of like, be the change you want to see in the world. And so I go first, and I get to be the change. And as we grow, and as this movement grows, and as we put the heart back in healthcare and we heal the healers, that ripple effect will go out to society, will go out to the patients, will go out to it'll go out to the bottom line. It can't, money is just energy, and it's a byproduct of giving value. And when you're happy and engaged and fulfilled and present, you get a wait list of patients, and you get great reviews, and you get lowered malpractice risk. These are all the things the hospitals care about. We want the same thing, but we're going about it the wrong way by putting the metrics first, instead of realizing that they'll take care of themselves, because we are the system, and we don't need anyone's permission to be ourselves.
What kind of support or connections would be most valuable for you at this stage? Who would you like to be connecting with?
Oh my gosh. I mean, like-minded physicians, like-minded people like you. And, this is a whole new thing for me, to reach out to the hospitals. And what's been most valuable is having physicians who are like, yes, this is what we need, and this is who you need to talk to at my hospital. And that's been, I'm blessed to have done ER for 30 years. So I have people that I've worked with many facilities, many places over the years. And so that's been the biggest, and that would be of most value and most help to get this out to more places so that it becomes a standard of excellence to have doctors who are supported in their meaning and their engagement, because it makes your center a center of excellence and gives you the community standing for a place that patients want to go to. And that translates to the bottom line, because there are, payments from Medicare and other things that you don't get if you don't meet those criteria. And so we all win. And I would say the same thing applies. What made you become a doctor in the first place? There was something about it that made it worth it to me to be paid less than a McDonald's worker for 7 to 10 years. And when I reconnected with that, then I was able to understand, like, okay, yes, it's not the way I would want it to be, but this is still what I love and still where I choose to be. And so the opportunity to rededicate yourself, and the reality is you may have to look at it and go, is this sustainable? Is this still what I want? Am I still the same person? And that's really the best I can say, because I'm not that familiar with the system beyond that. But there's something, because I imagine Canadian doctors have a long road to go through to become doctors as well. And so it's not like, oops, I tripped into being a doctor overnight. There were decisions and decisions and decisions and moments and years of decisions to end up in that place, I would imagine. And so what I would do is go back and find out where along that road or those decisions did it go from I choose this to I resent this. Find that tipping point.
Yeah, I think one of the common things is the billing and how that's set up, because patients are supposed to only address one issue at a time. And then often that's not the reality, right? Because they will share multiple issues, especially if they've been saving up for a doctor's visit. That seems to be a common issue here, is that doctors don't end up getting paid for the time that they spend with the patient, right? And that becomes unsustainable. Among other things, I'm sure that I'm not aware of. I think that a lot of Canadian doctors have left Canada. And then, of course, we have a lot of doctors coming in from other places. But the time frame for them to be approved to work in Canada has been very long. So that's something that it seems that they're working on to speed it up. So there are multiple things, right, at work here.
So in terms of the billing, and I think that's universal. That's one thing that doctors everywhere complain about, is it takes so much time and paperwork and effort and authorization. And that's something that has to be a personal decision or choice of if it's worth it to you and how much. Because, as an ER doctor, let's just make up some numbers. Let's say I get paid $200 an hour, but I've seen 4 patients, and I know that in that hour, they're going to bill $10,000 for 4 patients. I'm not doing any of the billing, but I'm also not getting paid for all of the time that I'm spending. And again, I'm just making up numbers. But so I could sit there and be mad that I'm not getting paid for the time, or I can be in the space of, this is the reality. This is what I'm going to get paid. And is it worth it? Is this something I still want to do? Is it fair? No. But this is what is. And that is one of the biggest causes of suffering, is trying to argue with what is. Now, it doesn't mean you don't want to change it. It doesn't mean it can't change. But spending your energy being angry at what is means you're not using that energy to channel into something different or new. And so that's where they have to find the balance of, well, this is the kind of doctor I want to be. and that means I might make less money. Okay, well, where is that balance? Where is it less but still livable? Because I still have a great living as an ER doctor, even though I'm not getting paid, and the corporation is probably taking 2/3 or more of what's generated from my work. But this is still what makes me happy. This is still where I want to be. I can't imagine doing or being anything else unless it's a mentor to other doctors.
Is your TED Talk already scheduled? Is there a location, date,
So,
anything?
Not yet scheduled. I'm actually in the midst of applying, and I'm hoping either Vegas or Virginia, but we shall see. So not yet scheduled. Yeah, I'm in the application process, so not yet accepted either. So let's back it up a little bit. Like I'm literally in the midst right now of applying.
Well, all the best with that. I really appreciate everything that you've shared, directly from your heart today about your experiences and how you would like medicine to shift. So I hope that the application gets accepted. And of course, you're open to other speaking opportunities as well, right? So,
absolutely.
All the best with this next chapter. Thank you so much for sharing.
It's been a pleasure. I always love spending time with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Gigi.